The three pillars right now: your product innovation, the efficiency of your marketing, as well as the efficiency in your operations. So if you're thinking about growth, if anybody tells you I grew this business and all they're talking about is growing it with meta ads or with email and SMS, it's not the full picture. So on today's episode of the 2x e-commerce podcast, we're diving into the new playbook for scaling e-commerce brands in 2024 and beyond, focusing on product innovation, efficient marketing, and operational excellence. It's a great episode you don't want to miss, so do stay tuned.
It's the 2x e-commerce podcast, hosted by Kunle Campbell.
Welcome to the 2x e-commerce podcast. I'm your host, Kunle Campbell. In today's episode, we're taking a deep dive into the key pillars that will drive growth for e-commerce brands in 2024 and 2025. Whether you're in the health and wellness or any other vertical, these insights are crucial for scaling rapidly in the modern landscape. We'll discuss how leading brands like Seed Health, Athletic Greens, and Mudwater are innovating with simplicity and minimalism, focusing on fewer SKUs while maintaining higher quality products that retain customers. We'll also explore the importance of balancing marketing efficiency, strong operational practices, and financial knowledge. If you want to build a scalable business, this episode is packed with strategies you can implement right away. Don't forget to follow us on your preferred podcast platform. Let's get started. So welcome to the 2x e-commerce podcast. I'm your host, Kunle Campbell, and this podcast is dedicated to rapid growth in online retail. We speak to e-commerce operators. I'm an operator myself, and marketers. And essentially, every time you listen to an episode in this podcast, our promise is you'd have an idea you can test right away at some point in your e-commerce business. It's hypothesis we provide you on this podcast. This one is different. We're not interviewing anybody today. You're going to be hearing from me. And what I want to talk about is the DNA, the modern DNA of growth in e-commerce businesses in 2024 and 2025. Now, I'm a wellness person. I'm very focused in the health and wellness space. The brands we own are in the health and wellness space. And I want to speak largely to it. It would still help if you're in other verticals, particularly verticals that lend themselves well to subscriptions. Even then, listen through if you're looking to essentially understand the fundamentals now in 2024 to 2025 that high growth companies, high growth consumer brands using e-commerce as their primary channel utilize to scale, to get that agility to grow extremely fast. I spoke about this in my newsletter called the Conscious Commerce Newsletter. If you haven't subscribed yet, it's on subscribe.2xecommerce.com. It's a fascinating read. I think we're in issue 7 now. Subscribe to it if you haven't anyway. So what are the fundamental ways in which brands like Seed Health, Athletic Greens, Mudwater have been using to make waves to growing their businesses with simplicity and minimalism moving forward? I think this is the new e-commerce playbook for growth in the health and wellness space. So that's what this episode is all about. So I'm going to be speaking to 3 pillars of growth. And along with those 3 pillars, there's also going to be a finance layer. Now, if you want to grow an e-commerce business and you're not financially educated, by that, if you cannot read a profit and loss and understand the fundamentals of a balance sheet, it is not to say you would not be able to grow. It's just going to be very difficult to comprehend the velocity of growth and the net impact. Sometimes growth comes at a cost. I can tell you that myself. We've been able to grow brands in my company at the long-term detriment of the brand. And at the same time, we've been able to grow brands in our business with long-term alignment. So having that fundamental finance layer is very important. We're going to talk about that a bit later. But where we want to start now are 3 pillars. The three pillars, in my opinion, right now, your product innovation, the efficiency of your marketing, as well as the efficiency in your operations. So if you're thinking about growth, if anybody tells you I grew this business and all they're talking about is growing it with meta ads or with email and SMS, it's not the full picture. To really grow a brand, you need three things. And if these three things don't necessarily work in sync, you're not going to get sustained growth. So what are those three things I mentioned earlier? It's product market, so product market fit, product, your marketing, and your operations. And they shouldn't really be glossed through, right? It cannot be glossed through. So let's start out with product. What do I mean by product? It all starts with essentially a great product, right? All brands you admire have products that you love that work, right? So they've undergone a thorough, rigorous product development life cycle, right? That ensures their offering delivers the results and retains customers. Everything comes to crap, absolute crap, if your product does not deliver what it says, but you're efficiently running your business from an operation standpoint, as well as growing through marketing, it will come to a halt. That's what kills dropshipping businesses. The issue with dropshipping is down to product most of the time. And I'm talking about this low quality dropshipping. It is down to product price mismatch, and the inability to retain customers. So what is the nuance in product? Now, if you listen to my last interview with Kelly Thornton, who was from Tidge Hanley, the men's skincare brand, one of the reasons why they've been able to be profitable for the last 5 years, except 1 year, which he mentioned, I think that was 2022, was primarily down to their ability to switch manufacturing partners due to cost. So they'd already developed their own formulas with high efficacy that will get people using it over and over again. That's a given. And he mentioned the fact that there was a chief product officer in his team that was just a genius in producing high efficacy products. With that gentleman in charge of all of that in terms of the end product, they own their formula. And when they own their formula, they were not tied to some contract manufacturer who was they were not buying and selling essentially. They owned their product. They can continue to improve, by the way. They own their IP. And then as a result of owning their IP, they're able to maneuver from an operational standpoint. I'm going to speak to operations a bit more. But your love and care for the customer through the product is essentially manifested through the amount of toil you put into building out your product. In the health and wellness space, it is so important to do that R&D, to own the IP. Because when it comes further down to an exit, which many of us will eventually want to do, that increases your multiple. The fact that you have IP on your formulas increases your multiple. It means that if I want to go to a new market, say Saudi Arabia or the Middle East, I essentially just take my formula with me and I find the right contract manufacturers to manufacture to that formula. As against trying to ask my suppliers, say, hey, how can we, so do you have facilities in the Middle East so we can buy and sell in those regions? So owning the product innovation is so important. And it brings me to the other point about modern brands like Seed Health AG1, Mudwater, what they do is they minimize the number of SKUs they have. So they're focused on product laser. Now, I can understand like in beauty categories where you have makeup and different tones of color, you just can't get away with it. But truly in product, less is more. Particularly in the beginning, in your first 25 million or so in turnover, less is absolutely more. Go on a SKU curl, understand your numbers, see what the sales velocity is, look at your loss leaders, if there are any loss leaders, and see how you can curl your SKU count so you can focus your energies on delivering high quality products that get customers to use over and over again, to get hooked essentially. I can't emphasize this enough. If we're speaking if this was a SaaS e-commerce business, it's the same thing. The SaaS e-commerce business is focused on product is the heart. The end, and when you look at it holistically, your entire brand is a product. The ability for your operations to sync well with marketing, ops, finance, that symbiosis creates a product, right? So the entire way you deliver the message, your brand, the entire thing is a product. The entire experience is a product. But when we're looking at developing the product, you've got to put your love, sweat, and tears into really testing and developing a product that would resonate very deeply with your audience. And you could start out with white labeling initially to get feedback, but the end goal after that is building your proprietary product. That's where the value is. It is where the value absolutely is. And then product, you can look at it from a point of view of manufacturing, owning manufacturing eventually. Now, that then makes you an asset heavy business. It may work or it may not work. I remember Harry's, the men's grooming brand. I think they do like shaving sticks, blades, basically, and all sorts of products for the shaving experience. And when Harry's really wanted to expand and double down, they bought factories in Germany, manufacturing factories in Germany to just have that ability to scale. But that was fueled by a lot of venture money, right? But at the basic, own your formulas, work on owning your formulas, work on owning your product. Because when you get that feedback from customers, you're able to amend and adjust and iterate on your product. Right. So product first. So we're thinking product first if we want to grow. That's step one. I'll be talking about step two shortly after this break. Remember our chat in May earlier this year, episode 33 to be specific, with Sam Piliero about scaling from $1 million to $10 million with Google Ads? We touched on something crucial: trust signals in your Google search results. Let's dig a little deeper. You've seen those stars next to some websites on Google, right? Those are seller ratings and they're game changers for e-commerce. Let me explain. These aggregated ratings come from your customers' reviews about their shopping experience on your website. They can seriously boost your visibility and credibility with potential first-time customers on Google's search results. Research carried out by reviews.io found that seller ratings can increase click-through rates on Google Ads by up to 17%. That's a lot of extra traffic, but it doesn't stop there. There are also product reviews that show up on Google Shopping search results, which are equally powerful. Unlike seller ratings, these reviews focus specifically on individual products, and they can bump up conversions by as much as 26% while improving click-through rates by 5%. Higher click-through rates mean lower ads, which is pretty impressive, right? Now, you might be wondering, how do I get these reviews working for me on Google? That's where reviews.io comes in. They've automated the whole process for e-commerce operators like you. from collecting reviews to displaying them where they matter most on Google. Reviews.io doesn't just do text reviews either. They're big on video reviews, which are fantastic for creating engaging user-generated content. This stuff is gold for boosting trust and conversions in your Google results. Want to take your Google presence to the next level? Right now, you can get 10% off your first year with reviews.io. Just reach out to the team via chat or email and mention 2x eCommerce. The offer is for new customers only. Terms and conditions apply. It could be just a thing to supercharge your e-commerce store and dominate Google search results. Okay, so the second cog for growth you want to get a grip of is your marketing. Now, most of what you listen to on this show is about marketing. Although we speak from time to time about operations and finance, we bring these guys in. And we've even spoken about product innovation. I would link to some of the product innovation episodes we've done in the past. But marketing is a very important pillar, as you can imagine. And I wrote about all the aspects of marketing quite extensively in my book, eCommerce Growth Strategy, which is there if you're watching this on video. And essentially, marketing is split in half. One is demand generation and the other is demand capture. You want to focus a lot of your efforts on demand generation. What is demand generation? It's putting out content that attracts an audience and a community that will eventually convert to customers. So at its widest net, you're reaching out to an audience that resonates with key features of the product that you're building. And then you essentially find that audience, you build a community around that audience by owning some data, having some more information about the audience, bringing them together from time to time, and eventually selling to them longer term. Now, this is not to say that some people would not just come across your brand for the first time and essentially impulse buy. It happens every day. Like impulse purchases do happen, particularly when recommendations are made. But the key thing here is building a community. And the most effective way of building community now is to essentially connect to other community leaders or nodes, as I call them, and tapping into their communities to build your own larger community. What do I mean by that? In plain English, influencers, simply creators and influencers. So using creators and influencers on a long-term basis, right? So the idea of influencer marketing is not necessarily for performance. Performance is great. We've used performance in influencer marketing a number of times to its full effect, but you want longer term advocates, more or less brand ambassadors that represent your brand. When the audience or people come across them, they don't need to relate with them too long or consume much of their content too long before they know that particular person of influence endorses your own brand or is associated with your brand. You need to build some sort of association. So it's a very careful selection. And when you look at brands like Seed or AG1 or Mudwater, they select these people of influence very carefully. They look at podcasters in the health space, in the health and wellness space, specific social media, people who are creating educational content in the wellness space. I'm speaking to educational content at scale relating to health and wellness, and seeing if their values, their philosophy to health aligns with your offering. So if you are bringing vegan product to market, there's no way you're going to start to reach out to a carnivore person of influence. There's just no alignment there. So it's really looking at your DNA, having absolute clarity of who you are as a brand is an organism. So what are the values of your brand? and how those values essentially align with the values of the people of influence. In modern day now, it's really edutainment. So at the core, you're educating a market with a sprinkle of fun to it. That's how I define edutainment. That's the first bit. All that bit I've talked to you about is the first bit of all of your marketing. So really get into that acquisition. And then the other of your marketing essentially is the retention. And it's a very important bit. Because if you have decent retention rates, you become a farmer, you're nurturing customers, and you have a business that actually is taking care of its existing customer base. With retention, there are many, and I covered this in issue 6 of my newsletter, the Conscious Commerce newsletter, where we talk about the visual engineering, the user experience engineering for retention. And again, if you're in the health and wellness space, most of your products will lend themselves to a subscription model, and how to use the power of defaults to drive more subscriptions. That's a way to engineer retention visually and effortlessly for the user. And at the same time, you have many other layers to this. How well you communicate and how often you communicate, the frequency, relevancy of your communication with your customers. For me personally, I'm not a retention expert. Retention and communication is my weakest spot as an individual, but I would, without a doubt, plug in a retention manager the moment and I can afford a retention person in my business as quickly as possible if I was to start an e-commerce business. Many of you would have one already. Having an agency is not good enough. You need to essentially have a lead of retention. Naked Wines do it. I did it a few years ago. I wrote it was more or less a breakdown or a teardown of Naked Wines, their subscription business. I wouldn't sell alcohol, but they do sell alcohol, and they're very successful in their own right subscription business. And I spoke about the way they engineer retention into their model. You can't just buy Naked Wines without having to subscribe as an angel in the first place. And an angel essentially is a subscriber. And the way it's engineered is very intentional. This is managed, that there's one person in the company that actually manages retention, and it's held responsible for their retention rates, essentially. And when you get into retention, the word of retention, you need to understand churn. You need to understand how many people are falling, and if you're bringing in more people, then you're losing people, fall out for many reasons. And then engineering some sort of feedback system to understand why people are actually subscribing. So you can see if it's a product problem, an operations problem, maybe with delivery, or a financial problem where you price yourselves out. So understanding all the reasons why people and aggregating it to get some sort of intelligence on will be a game changer for your business. So I just wanted to touch on that. So with your marketing, you're only trying to find a fit for your product. And your product has to have its why and its values and it's who it's addressing it to. And then you're meant to find the many sorts of profiles and segments out there that will get the who. That at the top level is what marketing is all about. It's about acquiring people into your system and ensuring that fewer people come out of your system than they leave. Working with community leaders or people of influence, creating content that attracts who you're trying to find, and systems for retention. That's marketing in a nutshell. Now, branding is the personality. Who are we turning up to? I was reading an article or a post from someone at, I think it was the CEO of Liquid Death. And they essentially are marketing water and branding water the same way that you would market and brand beer, like lager or craft beer. That was his expose. And when I looked at it again, I was like, this looks like a beer can. Their marketing is so extreme. It's actually more extreme than anyone selling beer, really. but it's out there. So that's the personality and the brand there, which accelerates your marketing efforts. The brand is that soul. It's the 360 of who we are. So if we were a person, who are we? And then the marketing essentially takes that to market with the use of psychology and psychology tactics and ways to influence people to take action. That's it in a nutshell. Then we go into manufacturing operations, which many people look as a cost center from a financial standpoint, but it really isn't. It's actually a growth center. Yes, it has cost in it, but your operations, if you are really good at operations, you can minimize cost, because operations essentially is this nice mix of people, processes, and systems that essentially deliver your manufacturing and your supply chain to the last mile delivery to your customers and even customer support, right? Operation keeps everything moving smoothly from manufacturing to the end user. And if at every step of your ops, you're being efficient and you can control cost, you leave more revenue for marketing and product research, R&D, which in of itself grows the business. So with an efficiently operated business, you can grow further, and it doesn't necessarily handicap your efforts in growing. That is the key point in operations. So it's really behind the scenes efficiency. And not many podcasts speak to the importance of operations. And I'm going to change that in this podcast. We need to get into the nitty gritty of operations. And that's because, as much as principles in operations, there's no set playbook that will teach you how to manufacture more efficiently. It's nuance, right? But there are some core principles to operations which we'll bring in, but we don't necessarily want to get into an e-commerce operations podcast. But your manufacturing, you will know. Again, remember when we talked about like IP and owning your product, owning your formula, owning your IP? Those are little bits of detail that ensure that your operations will be going in the right direction from a cost efficiency standpoint, particularly when you're now making decisions around manufacturing, right? From a supply chain and last mile delivery standpoint, simple things like your box standardization, just your packaging standardization, can save you or cost you money. I remember my first Amazon business, we were selling, it was a brand. It was actually a really nice brand. It was a baby safety brand. And we're selling these corner guards. And we started to sell like extra large versions. And that changed the category of our warehouse cost with FBA. We're using Amazon FBA, and it significantly had an impact on our margins. It almost took us out of business by going for an additional extra size, because many customers wanted to go for that extra size, and we couldn't necessarily. We're pressured from a price perspective due to competition. So little pieces, little attention to detail like this really matter, and they can save you cents on the dollar, but at scale, thousands, if not millions. So operations is really key, and getting experts at specific aspects of operations will help you. Customer experience and customer service is part of operations. It's where you fix issues, and your ops really need to be well connected. Your ops and product people need to be really well connected to what you're doing at the customer service, because that is getting first-hand feedback from customers. Now, when you have all this in place, some sort of financial model has to run it. If you're bootstrapped, there would be a limited number of lever points you can operate. If you're financed externally with some angel funding, some funding, it would be a different set of people you plug into your business. Finance is your scorecard at the end of the day. I often say once you satisfied customers to the highest degree, your scorecard really is your P&L, your profit and loss statement, what's on your balance sheet. So with leveraging all of these three key points and understanding what financial profile you are, you will get that fair advantage because all of this would uptick your retention rates and the value of a customer to you, the long term value of each and every customer to you, signifies the relationships you've built that enables customers come back for more at the product level, at your ability to deliver your promise through effective operations and the message you've sent in your marketing. And with this consistency, you will find and you can plug in, you have scalable growth, right? You have very scalable growth. You can then pour in more capital into your marketing to continue to grow the brand. Now, with your addressable market in marketing, you might start out a bit with your marketing and then slowly expand your target audience over time. There's one other trend I want to talk about before I wrap this episode off. It's just the power or the trend of simplicity, where brands are having 5 SKUs and hitting over $100 million in valuation just by focusing on a few very powerful, high quality products. So again, this is down to the efficacy of the product. And many of the time you find that these brands are first to market in marketing these products in a unique way. But the key thing is this power of focus, right? The power of minimalism. If you look at Athletic Greens, for instance, it's just their formulation, right? Their micronutrient formulation, and they walk that message over and over and over again till you get it. There are now many Me Too brands associated with the same offering and trying to develop more products. But AG1 was first to market. People saw their success and then they copied. That's not to say there's not enough in the space, but it's almost a winner takes all approach in terms of their market share in that segment. Same thing with Seed Health. They're a probiotic company. So they sell probiotic supplements in a capsule. I'm sure there are many other probiotics in the market, but they've done it in a unique way. They've used influencers to really drum that message. It's a singular, almost singular product. I think they only have 2 SKUs. They brought in a new SKU after the success of the first SKU. They just drum the message over and over again. If you think about Rainbow Dust by Space Goods, I'm not sure how many SKUs. Space Goods don't have that many SKUs themselves. They're a UK brand. And yeah, it's this focus on the singular and not necessarily just going full breadth. Now, you can go full breadth, but you just have to have that promise. And what I find is that when you go full breadth, you're not going to own all the formulas most of the time, which is okay to start with, but eventually you want to own the IP. So yeah, those are the pillars of strategic growth. This is what I call the new playbook for growth in e-commerce. Yeah, I think that's it. I just want to thank you all for listening to this episode. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. Remember to subscribe to the newsletter because I put in my thoughts on commerce there. I give a commerce tip in every issue, and I showcase $100 million in valuation e-commerce business in every issue, and we speak around health. So yeah, definitely want to subscribe. Just head over to subscribe.2xecommerce for more on that. And until the next time, folks, thank you for listening. Have a good one. Cheers. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the 2x e-commerce podcast. I hope you found our discussion insightful, especially as we explored how successful brands are scaling with focus on product innovation, streamlined operations, and targeted marketing. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. Your support allows us to continue to bring you the most valuable content and incredible guests. Please leave a review and share this episode with fellow e-commerce entrepreneurs and operators who would benefit from these strategies. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of e-commerce growth. Thank you for listening.